it's Graham from TutorialClarity, and today we're going to be taking this ridiculously handsome man, if I do say so myself, and make him more ridiculously handsome. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do here is we're actually going to take the background layer and we're going to duplicate it, and you'll see why later, but we're just going to duplicate that there, and let's double click this and call it main, just to easily understand what's going on here. So now we have our main and our background layer, which is locked. So we're going to work on our main layer here. It's just a clone of the layer below it. So first things first, to enhance this photo, we're going to adjust the contrast within the photo, and there's a couple ways of going about contrast. Fortunately for you guys, I'm going to be tackling both. But first things first, let's get the overall contrast in here, and you can do that by going up to the top left here and clicking on image, going down to adjustments, and it should drop down. You should see a bunch of stuff on the list. Just go up here to the one that says brightness and contrast, and that will bring up the brightness and contrast dialog. It has two sliders in it: the brightness slider, which obviously adjusts the overall brightness, and the contrast slider. And one thing I will say is the eye loves contrast, literally. I mean, if you don't believe me, you can test any photo, add contrast to it, and your eye will love it because the eye loves contrast. So you have to do things though and balance. It's all about balance. You don't want to go overboard. You don't want to make it look fake. You just want to make it look really nice, really appealing to the eye. So we're going to lower the brightness just a little bit, tone down the whites enough. In this picture, I'm going to tone it down to 30. It can be any picture you want. And we're going to drag up the contrast. I'm going to drag up the contrast to about 75. In fact, I don't want a dark feel in this you know, high contrast darks. I don't want that. I actually want it to be fairly bright. Let's brighten this scene up. Let's drag the brightness. For me, I'm going to drag it up to about 65. Again, I could go overboard, but that is just full. The whites are blown out. Don't want that. You want to be able to see things. So let's go to about 60, and we'll do about 75 even contrast, and then we're going to click OK on that. And the next thing you're going to notice is when you add a lot of brightness and contrast, some of your shadows, they become not so real looking, so to speak. So what we're going to do is, in our previous tutorials, we already went over the path tool and the pen tool, and we're going to go over to the paths tab, and we're going to click create a new path. And just to add some more flavor to this wall, because it kind of looks a little blown out, let's add some more darks. It's all about balance. We're just going to drag out here and just be very free roaming. We're not going to go exactly along the wall because we're going to feather the selection when we're done with it, so that things fade nicely. Nothing seems you know, irregular. So there's our selection, and we are going to feather this selection. You can get the selection by control left clicking on your path. Then we'll just swap on over here to the layers. We still have our main layer selected, nothing different. And we're going to go to select, modify, and feather, and we're going to feather this. This is a large image, so as I say with my feather selections, it varies on the image that you have. Play with it. If you have a small image, it may be anywhere from 10 to 20 pixels. In this case, I'm going to do it about 40 pixels, and you can still see it barely even moved with that. I'm just going to see if that was enough. I'm going to fill it with black, and I actually want it to be even more feather than that. That wasn't enough for me. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do another feather, and this time I'm going to do it by 30 more pixels, and that seems to be sufficient. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the Control plus L, that's Control plus L on your keyboard, and we're going to bring up the levels. And this is the other mode of contrast that you can pull off within Photoshop. It's very accurate. It pulls out the brights, the midtones, and the darks. And we're going to drag down the darks just a bit, just to show you. I'm going to go really far, and you can see what happens over there. But that looks irregular. That doesn't look natural. So we're going to just go back to the middle and slightly slide over to the right, just enough. Maybe brighten up the whites around the outer rims of the wall just a bit, because there are some whites there, and we're going to tone that down. And there you have it. So that looks like a lot sharper of a shadow around the corner of that bin there. And alright, let's go on to the next part of this. We're going to clean up, despite the fact that this man, whoever he might be, is ridiculously handsome. there are some imperfections to this guy. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in here on the face, and we're going to select the pen tool again, or you can shortcut, hit P on your keyboard. If you don't know any of that, it's right over here on the toolbar. You see the pen tool. And we're just going to drag and get a fairly accurate selection here. And bring it up around the ear, some of the neck. Again, we are going to feather this selection, so it doesn't have to be terribly accurate. But we're just going to do this, and we're not going to go into the nose, I don't think, too much. Actually, we are. We're going to be dangerous. We're going to go into the nose, and I'm going to show you how to equalize that out with another tool in Photoshop, because you're going to see what's going to happen. But again, we connect the points by clicking on the first point that we started with on the pen tool, and that's our selection. And no worries, just come on over to the Path tab, and you can see your new selection is right there, as we did with the one before that. We're just going to Control-click. There's our selection. Go back to the Layers tab, and you guessed it, we're going to feather it out, modify, that's select, modify, and feather, if you haven't memorized it by now. And we're really zoomed in, so we're not going to have anything crazy like 30 pixels. We're actually going to do it about, we're going to do it about 18 pixels. Yeah, that seems about right. And here's what we're going to do now. We're going to go to Filter, Blur, and Surface Blur to tone out the qualities of the skin. And this is where you really have to play. It depends upon the individual, things like that, but you don't want it to be overly blurry, so to speak. So we're not going to do that. But one thing I actually am going to show you before we do the surface blur, go ahead and cancel. I do want to show you how to subtract from selections. So if you come up here, you can see by default I have the polygon lasso tool selected. If you hold down left click, it drops out. We're going to select the lasso tool. I don't want this area in here where the chin is to be blurred. I want that to kind of stay dark and toned. So we're going to select that, and then you come up here and you're going to see 4 here. This is the normal mode. This is what it should always be at. If you're going to add to your selection, you can do this and drag out, and you see what happens. It's pretty intuitive. It adds to the selection. Control Z to undo that. Subtract the selection is what we're going to be doing now. This is really an intersecting selection, so it's the absence of adding and subtracting. So whatever I pull out of the current selection is going to be all that's selected, and that is very useful for reflections and things that I will cover in later tutorials. But just to get on with this tutorial, we're going to subtract out this bit here, and that seems a little better. Let's maybe subtract a little bit out there, and let's subtract this part of the nose out. Yeah, so we have a good flat face here that we're gonna modify, and then we'll go back as we did before, and we're gonna go to surface blur. And now we're really gonna dive in here, because the radius, the surface blur is really good for toning out skin, and it's not always easy to notice if you do it properly. You notice if I jack up the radius, things become, a little sharper. But that's because of the threshold. So we're actually within the 10 to 20 pixel range in here anyway. So we're only going to do it about 10. And we adjust the threshold properly. You can see if I drag up the threshold, this is where you have to be really careful, because it can get really blown out. We're going to be very generous with this, and we're just going to go to about 8, maybe 7. Let me just see what that looks like. Yeah, 7 looks about good. Maybe toy with the radius. Yeah, the radius was good at 10 pixels. And we're going to hit OK. So now we actually flattened out the skin on here. And he has some imperfections here. Maybe something that is rising up under the skin. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to introduce you to another tool called the Dodge tool. And you can see it. It's underneath the Blur tool. And you can select it. And then we're going to select a soft brush and diameter just around that edge, maybe, I don't know, smaller than that just a bit. And we're gonna, with the Dodge tools, it brightens up the whites within an object. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna make this a little bit brighter, since that's a darker red, and you can see it just kind of disappears there, it's gone. And we can do that with other things here like that, and maybe we see something along here, and that is pretty good to me.